So here was a site as we left it last week. We have our ability to navigate around in our header. So we wanted to do a few things. We never built log out, and then we also want to be able to change our header so that when the user's logged in, the navigation says add beer listings and log out. And when the user is not logged in, they just see register and login as those links. And then we also need to build a log out page. So if you go into our, actually, I'm going to first of all make a copy of my files for today. So I'm just going to jump into my lesson 9 folder, grab all my files, and I'll put them into my lesson 10. And I'll open up my lesson 10 folder. Other thing I want to just change is I want to change my htaccess file, because right now if I have a 404 error, it's going to, I think it's still pointing to my lesson 8 or lesson 9 folder. I want to change that so it points to this week's 404 page. So I'll open up my files for this week. And I'm going to go to htaccess. Yeah, it's still pointing to my lesson 8 folder. So I'm going to change that to point to my lesson 10 folder. So if I get any 404s, I'll get the right page for this week. So I just changed my htaccess. And now I should be able to load everything from lesson 10. I can go to my default page, add, I'm logged in, which is why I can do this, register or log in. So we need to build, right now I have no ability to log out. What's the only thing I can do to log out? Yeah, shut down the browser or not touch anything for 20 minutes and let it time out. Okay. So we want to add a logout page. And we want to add a link to it in the header. So let's open up our header file. And let's put this link here. We'll put it after beer listings. I know normally logout goes on the far right. It will once we change this to only show one set of nav or the other. So let's add a link. It goes to logout.php. And then let's create a new file in our lesson 10 directory called logout.php. So we're going to link to this page. This will be an invisible page. We'll basically just want to log the user out and then redirect them. So I'm going to make a new PHP file called logout. I can take out all the HTML tags. We don't need any HTML on that page. And if I just jump to Blackboard, I've given you a bit of a template for what should go in logout. So this is the last item here in lesson 10. I guess I can move it up here because we used it first. So I'm going to grab all that code, copy it, dump it in here. And I want to take out any white space at the top. I want that PHP tag to be the very first line. Notice the line numbers. It starts at line number 1. So I've made comments as to what we want to do. We've got a sort of a 3-step process for logging the user out. Then we'll take them back to the home page, so the users never see this page. What things are going to need to go on line numbers 1 and 15 in that case, if we're going to redirect the user off to the home page?
OB start plus.
You got it. So we will start our output buffering because we know we're going to redirect the user. And now we've got 3 functions of the session object. What 3 functions will we need to call here? And I've kind of, right, so we use session start the last few weeks. Seems kind of stupid, right? We want to get rid of the session, yet we actually have to call start first. Before we can get rid of you, we still have to call start. And then there's 2 other functions here. And actually our code editor should give us some prompt. We want to remove any variables we've put in here. So it's somewhere in this list. Yeah, that's the one. Session unset will remove any variables that we've put into the session object. So right now we're storing the user ID in the session object. So in our little beer store, we only have 1 session variable. So we'll call session unset. I'm just going to open my validate page for a minute so we can look at where we set that variable in the first place. Right? So this was the code we had taped up on the wall. The other day we called session start, and then we populated a session variable called user ID with the user's ID from the database query, if we found their username and password. So we only filled 1 session variable. In many sites, when users log in, we might have more than 1 session variable. We'll typically store the user's ID. What other things about that user might we want to store into a global or a session variable when someone logs in? Sorry?
If you're using like e-commerce site, they might have stuff they bought and they recommend for us to get.
Absolutely. Okay, so preferences would be stored and probably recorded in a session variable. So as the user moves around, we know their preferences. Yep. Right. Your roles and permissions would be another one. Once we're identifying you, if we look at Blackboard, right, if we're all looking at this same page, and I think we've talked about this before, right, we're looking at the same URL. It's not a different page that you get and I get, but we see some different things. What are a few things on here that I see that looks different than your version of this page? Yeah, the navigation's different, right? You don't have that. Do you even have this gray bar at all?
You can edit, right?
Yeah, I also have this section here. Right? So when I log in on Blackboard, not only is Blackboard storing my ID, but it's also storing my authorization level, my roles and permissions, and then it's checking. There's a script that runs here that says if the user is in the role of faculty, display this in these areas, otherwise hide them. We might also store, it's common, we might store the user's actual name or their username in a session variable, maybe even a link if they have an avatar to their profile picture. So again, as they move around, we can just pull those things out of the session object and display them on any page we want.
You store some of these cookies or no?
So the cookies would be separate. Yeah, so that's a text file written into the browser. Okay. That stuff could be stored in cookies. Here's a common one. For example, I go regularly read this one message board. And on the message board, talking about preferences, you can view a tree view, right? So all the messages are nested, or you can read a flat view where it's just a list. So there's a little checkbox. Do you want flat view or tree view? That sets a cookie. So every time I go back into that browser, it automatically knows what view, what my preference is. So it could be a session variable, it could be a cookie as well. Or some sites that let you change the look or the skin of it. Right? In fact, I can do that here. In Blackboard, it will change the preference. It could be a cookie, it could be a session. As the end user, we don't really know. So when we call session unset, however many variables we've put in the session object, they all get removed.
But isn't that redundant when you already end the session? That will get deleted?
You would think so, but we'll try it. We'll see. We'll see in a minute, Omar. You would think that ending the session should automatically remove the session variables. In PHP, strangely, it doesn't always. So it's a good idea to call both. We'll try it in a minute. We'll try it both with and without that function. So then our last function to actually end the session, which function do we want to call here? Yeah, session destroy. That will terminate that session. So once we've saved this, we should be able to go back to refresh our beers page. If we click log out, we want to get directed to default, and then we shouldn't be able to go back to the beers page without logging in again. Let's try it. So I'm going to go to beer listings. I'm still logged in, right? I still see all my data. Now I have my log out link. So if I click log out, okay, so it redirected me, which is good. But now here's the real question. Am I actually logged out? If I go to beer listings now I'm locked, right? We've logged out. I can't. So my home page, register, and login, these pages are public, but I cannot get in to beers. Now, Omar, I'm going to try it to answer your question. I'm going to take out, you don't have to change yours. We'll see what happens. Whoops, and I hit I hit the display. Okay, give me a second because the display is going to shut off and then turn back on. It'll take about 30 seconds. So I'm going to try, I will comment out the unset, or you can try it in yours. Comment out the session unset. Then let's save our log out. Let's log back in. So when I log back in, I can get into my beer listings. If I click log out now, okay, well on my server, it still works even without unset. I don't know if they've made a change in the PHP version. In the past, I've had to call unset, or my session variable has still persisted. But if you try it without unset, does it work?
I'm logged out. I can't log in.
Because you don't remember your credentials from last week? Well, go make a new account then. Remember I said use a login that you will remember, because our site is now private for the rest of the course. So if you forgot the login you created for yourself, you need to register and make a new account. What I suggest is use test@test.com as the username and test as the password. So mine did work even without the unset. Sorry for shutting down my display. Anybody else want to try it and let me know if it still works when you disable the unset?
Mine still works.
It still works. You're still logged out. Okay. So in the past, I discovered that the hard way, because I had students saying, I've called destroy, yet I can still go back to my private page. Why? And we discovered that the session variables, you had to remove them manually. But maybe that's been changed in a newer version of PHP. So this logout script is really, it's the only PHP logout page you ever need, pretty much, right? This is going to work in any any application. The only thing that will ever change is the URL you want to redirect to, right? We might change the name of the page. It might be index. It might be something else. Home, wherever you want to take the user. So the last thing we need to do here is we want to change our navigation, right? So we basically have 3 private links, which are these 3. Add beer listings and log out, and 2 public links. So we want to change our header so we're showing either the 3 private links or the 2 public links, but we're not showing them all 5 at the same time. So in our header, we need to write a little if statement. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to highlight these 5 lines, and I'll indent them so I can wrap them. I'm going to open a set of PHP tags above my first li and say if what value is going to, can we check that will tell us if the user's been authenticated or not? Yeah, we're checking for a particular variable. Right, we're going to check the $_session user ID, right? This is the variable that we set when the user logs in successfully. If it's not empty, I'll just take out that curly brace, closing one. I'm going to open a curly brace. So if it's not empty, we are going to echo our 3 private links. That's what we'll do if our session user ID isn't empty. Else, we'll echo our public links. And then we'll close our PHP tags. Maybe I'll put in a comment here. So these are our private links. And these are our public links. Well, that's a good question. Let's think about this. We can only call session start once per page. We're calling it on auth. So let's have a look. It depends which order. We may have to move where we're calling session start. Sorry, I'll put the code back for a minute. I guess the thing is this. If we require our header first, then we need to call session start on the header. If we require
session start more than once because yesterday I called a bunch of times and the agent told me an error or
I'll try it. Okay, when I've tried it before, I've gotten an error. It says that I've gotten an error saying I can't call session start more than once, that it's already started. So let's think about this. Yes, on our home page, we haven't called session start, so this will always be empty. So that is a problem. Let's go here and look for a minute at beers. Here we're doing authentication. I think you're right. I think we'll need to call session start on the header, but then we're going to need to switch the order of these. We'll have to call the header before we can call auth. So in my header, before my if statement, try it without and see whether I get an error. When I've done it before, I've gotten an error saying I can't call session start twice. So we will call session start here. We may have to move a couple things around, but we'll see. Omar, did you say last week coffee lines were a lot shorter at 10 o'clock than at 9:50? Is that you told me that, or is that?
No.
Oh.
I was the other way around. So it doesn't matter.
All right. I owe you guys your prize. Okay, so let's try it like this. So when I click, go to default. So now on default, those 3 private links are hidden because I'm not logged in. There's no user ID in the session. Let's see what happens now if I log in. See, session has already been started. So I get a warning, not an error, which I don't want, right? Because I'm calling auth first on this page. Auth calls session start. Then I call header. Header's calling session start again, and I'm getting this issue. So what I want to do now on my private pages, so on beers, I'm going to need to reverse the order here. I'll have to call my header first. And my auth second. Gonna have to change a few pages to make this work. So on beers, this should, now on my auth page, I'm gonna take session start out because it's now on my header instead. So now it means all my private pages will need my header. So we have to juggle things around a little. So I will call session start in my header instead of in my auth, but I need to make sure I always call header first then. Yeah, I did it. So in beers, I called header first because this calls sessions. So here's the order, like beers loads. First it calls header, header calls session start to check what the link should be. Then my execution on beers continues. Now I need to check, is my user logged in? So I'm probably going to need to do the same thing on some of my other private pages. So this error should go away now on my beer listings. And notice my public links are hidden, so my header's working properly. Doesn't say register and log in. But when I add, I've got the same issue. Now it's saying I'm not logged in because, again, I've got to switch the order. I need my header to be called first and my auth file to be called second. So I have to open up beer. And again, I'm going to move my auth. I've got to call header first. Whichever one calls session start has to go first because both of those files will need to use the session object. So again, I moved header above auth. And I also have, what do I have? Delete. So on my delete page, well, I didn't even have the header. And I didn't make it private, but I should. My delete page should be private, and so should my save page. I'm going to add that. Because if I don't make this page secure, anybody who knows that URL can go into my delete page, put in a beer ID, and delete something from my database without being logged into my website. So my delete beer page, I never made this page private, but it should be private. And same with my save beer page. Again, I don't want someone to go there directly to that URL and try and save changes if they're not logged in. So I'm going to copy those and put them on my save page as well. So on save beer, yeah, I never included my authentication and my header on my save page. So I'm going to put them in here too.
With it being a PHP file, it wouldn't be accessible online, would it?
Well, if we put it up on the server, not that someone could see the code, but if there's no authentication, anyone who types the URL is going to load the page, right? If you don't secure it. Because think about it. Look at it this way, Omar. Let me just go back here, right? If I look at my delete link, if I copy that URL and now I go down to a different browser, so I'm some other user. If I hit enter, it's going to load that page, right? So if someone knows that URL, they could go in, put in an ID, and they'll actually delete that record from my database, even though they're not logged in. So even though save and delete are hidden pages, there's no HTML, right? We just work in the database and redirect. If we don't secure them, there's a big security gap in our site because those pages are still public. Anyone who discovers those URLs can run those pages. Does that make sense? Okay. So now on my ad, my beer listings, so now we've got our private nav. I can log out and my nav switches back to the public. Private links go away, public nav shows up. So Asa, you don't get that error message with the session. You're using MAMP. So I guess the PHP settings on MAMP, your settings are different. That it probably just suppresses it. It's a warning, not an error. So it's probably set by default to suppress those warnings.
I checked the Mac suppresses the error because I found a topic in the Stack Overflow.
Ah.
Getting the error in the Windows, they're not getting in the Mac.
Okay. So if you're running it on Windows, what about on DreamHost? If you put it up, did anybody get that error I got that the session was already started? Or am I the only one on my local server because I'm on Windows?
Okay.
You got it on DreamHost?
Oh, no.
If you put it on the server,
I upload the server to my project and I get there.
okay, so I guess it's running on Linux. It's Apache on Linux. So I guess that's a Windows only issue. I guess on the other operating systems, you can call session start multiple times without a problem. But I can't on my local system. Okay, or does anybody have any questions about logging out or what we did on our header with our public and private nav? For your assignment, in terms of your navigation, you have two options. You could make two separate headers, a public header and a private header, and your public page could require the public header. Your admin pages could require admin header. Or you could make one header and do something like this, that there's only one header, but the links that show in the header will change depending on whether the user is an admin user who's logged in or whether they're anonymous. You can do it either way, whichever way you want. Okay, I think we'll take a pause here. That was the last authentication piece I wanted to cover. So we'll take a break, and when we come back, we will start looking at file uploads. I want to start being able to upload the logos for each beer. I've collected all the logos for the beers in my database. I put them on Blackboard, and we'll look at how we can upload them through our PHP pages. Okay, so